It's a human need. If you put it on there, when I say visual film, it's a needful film in a very intricate way, related to our whole mental structure.
I think there are two very different issues. One is people who have a need that go seeking. My son died, I want to talk to him, I'm going to go, my friend died, I'm going to go sit in this room. And you open yourself up for an experience. And then there's Michael, who's sitting in the garden innocently one day, doesn't believe any of this stuff, and something floats by. There's no need, there's no express need. He didn't even know who this woman was, he certainly. And I think it's, when I started talking, I said it's, when some unseen force or power acts on you without your invitation, that's the one that I think is really the, now what do I do with this? What does Moses do when he's standing there and all at once, the bush, I didn't go out with matches and say, I'm going to burn this bush up and see if I can't get.
I just wonder if things like the Industrial Revolution that really started taking over the whole world and the transformation of the world into an industrialized kind of existence didn't challenge everyone, and these things. I mean, this, to me, I do consider this at times a medium. It's also...
It's now the spirit world.
Yeah. I think there's a spirit world there, but I think it's a little more evil than everything. But there are so many...
there actual real living people on the other end?
Yeah, and this guy.
Maybe not.
There's so much that takes us away from everything that the Shakers did in the mid-19th century and early 19th century, where they were focused on this peaceful existence and this sort of communal existence that was for the benefit of everyone involved and the care of everyone involved. And then as time came on and it was more distracting, more difficult, the 20th century happened and the wars happened and that was it.
That's an interesting thought. And Jerry, tell me if I'm right, but all of the gifts were gifts of kindness.
Some were.
Were there any that were pointed and nasty?
Yes. I mean, not pointed, there were rules and regulations, there were corrections, there were advice, there was encouragement, there were gifts of, reward. I mean,
you better do better.
Yeah.
Well, it was to make a better world.
To make a better world.
So
it wasn't just mean spirited.
And that was true of the messages that came in the spiritualist church. They were all meant to try to help you live your life more effectively or more happily. So it does, and it was about creating community. So
I think it's very important. I think that they were in the community. I think that these things to some degree are catching. So it was not only that the other people were experiencing these revelations, but it made them more a part of their community if they were recipients of these things themselves. It was all working so that this would be an approved of, an advantageous form of behavior.
I think it's called a spiritual revival in the 1840s. I mean, that's from the outside, and revivals do that. Revivals.
That was a Christian revival, wasn't it? A Baptist.
No, I just mean in the Shaker Church. I mean, the view was this period of manifestations was a revival of the spirit. Yes. I mean, in a way, I don't know if they use that term, but people see it in revivals by nature. I think, where you put a bunch of people together and you heat them up. I mean, That's sort of what.
For some reason, I come back to the idea of a genius loci, which is the spirit of a place. And I was thinking of Michael among the peonies, But, what on earth is more left of the woman he was thinking of than the garden that she put so much into? And people think of, I hear this all the time, of being, I was at Mount Lebanon. Wow, that's a really special place. You really feel something when you're there. I mean, there are versions of this you hear all the time. And I was thinking in connection with that about Ian Forrester, Passage to India says only connect. He has this great mysterious story you can't quite figure out. He goes to all these weird places and weird people, and that's what he comes out with. And to me, it's this idea of connection, not necessarily to the person standing on your shoulder, but through all of these vibrations that the peonies have, and Mount Lebanon has, the places that people have been, whoever drew all this.
Well, that leads me to one way to close. If you also have to close.
Close?
We're here in this beautiful space, and I did call the Stephen Bullock, who's an authority on Freemasonry, and he said that there is evidence that Masonic societies were quite involved with spiritualism. And he wanted to know more about this place, but he sent me to a site which said that an occult tradition of seeking spiritual illustration thrived in the 17th century, but had since gone underground, marginalized by the progress of rationalist and empiricist modes of thinking, but was preserved most fully and systematically in clandestine Freemason. So, if we knew how to read it, we might find it everywhere here. And I also said that the Masonic societies welcomed Swedenborg's teaching. So again, the father of spiritualism.
Good choice.
Spiritualism. So it's we didn't know that when we began, but we've come full circle, and again are so indebted.
Okay.
To both of you, thank you. And now, Jerry.
Now, what were you going to say about that?
Well, a couple of remarks. One is that is Elisha Gilbert that built this house?
Yes, the second.
The second.
There's four of them.
Okay, so which one was the first?
Well, there's Elisha.
Oh, the second was the one who started the lodge here,
Yes.
or was it his father? He did.
No, it was him.
Okay.
The second.
That in around 1780, when the Shakers were up on the hill at the Darrow farm, and having the revivals up there before, when Mother Ann was there, Elisha Gilbert and Eliezer Grant both founded the Unity Lodge here, and Dr. Isaac Averill, who was eventually a member of the lodge, but not one of the founding things, came up to interview Ann Lee. And I think probably the sense would be to check out the Shakers and make sure that they weren't anti-Masonic, would be one thing, and just to find out what they're about. Grant later went on to persecute the Shakers and imprison them and give them a lot of trouble, but they got back at him when his house went up for auction. They bought it and had a meeting in his barn and tore it down. It was the end of the Grant story, but no relation, thank you. But I ran into one author who was talking about this, and he talks about, there's not much of a connection between Shakers and Masons. There were certainly Shakers who had been Masons and had been before they became Shakers. They couldn't continue. But one of the guys says, and I'm not sure I understand this, he said that both groups, the Shakers and the Masons, were both working on the mystical restoration of the Hebrew temple. And I thought that was an interesting phrase, and probably the mysticism, that getting back to that mysticism that had sort of started to be wiped out. And that the author said the Shakers, though, felt that the Masons were traveling down, that they'd been there and were falling off, and the Shakers were on the way up, but they were both sort of doing the same thing, but the Shakers were going to be the more successful. Anyway, but I just think, I was sort of amazed just to think that the man who built this house had talked to him.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty powerful connection.
And talk to Anna Lady. That is powerful.
interview mother. I mean, I think that's sort of,
And they were